You're a lot younger than I imagined.
Yeah, well, it looks can be deceiving. 36 now, but yeah.
It's pretty young for such a grand plan.
It is. Like I've been, you know, my friends and family have been asking me what am I doing. It's a bit of a mad one, really, to be honest. But I don't know. I think it's a good. It's worthwhile endeavour.
Yeah. So there's been quite a few developments. We've been talking about this for probably almost 6 months at this stage. Potentially a big setback over the last few weeks. Before we get into that and where this project is going, for people who are listening and who don't know you and don't know the people involved behind this proposal for club football on the island of Ireland, what is the vision? What is the grand plan?
I think the grand plan, in a very basic level, is just to restructure domestic club football on an all-island basis. Both leagues, you know, there are green shoots of positive signs, but I think they could use something new, something that rejuvenates the game, puts it on a sound footing, and that's basically it. And I think the project and I guess my interest in it has come out of the club's interest. The clubs are up for this, really, and it started from the northern side when I lived there, and the northern club saying if it made sense financially, we'd definitely go for it. So that's where it all started.
You've said a couple of times since we met that you're not a League of Ireland man. So what sparked your interest?
I think I lived in London for 4 years, and in 2016 I moved to Northern Ireland, and I think maybe it's because I'm a Man United fan, and conveniently I started drifting away from English soccer, I think, but it's when I moved home, and I don't know, I just kind of fell out of love a little bit with English soccer. And you know, it wasn't just when Ferguson left. I think when you saw Michael Owen scoring for Man United, there's something. There was I would say a slow drift, and then as I moved home, and obviously the GAA here is an immensely successful product, sport, and I think that local connection is something that people don't realise that soccer has as well. Like GAA, soccer is built on the back of volunteerism, so I just felt it was more real, the league here, and coming from Kerry in terms of League of Ireland coverage, it's a bit of a black spot, so I didn't have a relationship with the League of Ireland. I've said previously that the only mention of it in our house was when Cork City were hosted Galatasaray, and my dad went down to watch it, and they ended up playing Man United in the next round, actually. But apart from that, there was no relationship to the League of Ireland, so I'm definitely a latecomer to it. I can't get around that. So
if you don't come from that League of Ireland background of one of those people in the stands, looking around thinking, we got to strive for more, we've got to make this league better. What is your background? What is the expertise you're bringing to this?
I wouldn't claim to have the right expertise for it, but I'm a data scientist, and when I was working in London, that's what I was in. I was in tech, I was in data science, and I had a small company that was acquired by a Northern Irish company, so I moved there. And when I started speaking to, I would say, Northern Irish chairman, and I guess they validated the idea in terms of we're up for this, then I just went away and I wouldn't, you know, geeked out, so to speak. I just started looking at the population sizes, the hinterlands of clubs, the attendances, compare them to similar sized leagues in Europe, namely Denmark and Scotland, and just tried to understand why the attendances here were relatively lower.
What you come up with?
What you come up with when you look at, say, Visit Britain surveys and statistics of shirt sales and TV packages on the island, a picture starts to emerge of an island that's obsessed with football, but just not our own football. And I think in terms of visits to Britain alone, the Republic is by far the biggest leader in that. That's in the Visit Britain 2015 survey. So when you add the North to that, I think we're 60% greater than the next. I think Norway might be in second place, and that's just the English Premier League. If you add Scottish visits to that, we're just off the charts. The biggest importer of football, I would say, in Western Europe. We've just so apart from a core base, which thankfully is growing, but it's still relatively small relative to the overall interest in football. A picture emerges of just an island that loves English and Scottish football and not our own.
What would be the attraction for an All-Ireland league?
I think it, excuse me, I think it would bring a new dimension to the whole thing. First of all, you know, the island as a whole is about 6.6 million people, and that would be 1 million more than Denmark and 1.2 million more than Scotland. So it brings, I think, more of a critical mass. A lot of these clubs in Belfast wouldn't have GAA to worry about competing for their fan base. So I think they would have a large uplift, so to speak. The Sedanta Cup showed the potential, especially in the early years when you had like 3,000 Glentoran fans travelling to Cork for the final. There is a huge latent interest in football. So I think it just means that you have a larger market. And I think for sponsors, the ones that we've spoken to, it's a new story. Originally we were aiming, and I guess, you know, with the IFA statement, that's more ambitious now, but 2021 is the 100-year anniversary of the league breaking up. So it's just a nice story for advertisers as well.
Who else is involved in this then? Because you mentioned your background as a data scientist and obviously have an interest in sport and an interest in football, and this obviously grabbed your attention. When you've tried to put together a package of people who can help this progress,
yeah,
who's at those meetings?
Well, Mark Duffy, who's even younger than I am, 26, 27, he's a councillor in Mayo. He was the first to come on board. And then, I guess, more well-known figures like Brian Kerr, obviously, Alex Horn, who ran the FA in England for 5 years, Catherine Toolan, the head of the Convention Centre in Belfast, Stafford Reynolds, who's a former chairman of Glentoran, Brendan Dillon, former chairman of the league, and Kieran Medler, who's the head of tax at BDO Accountancy. So a good mix, a good north-south mix, and a good east-west mix in terms of Alex, and actually Oliver Weingarten, who is the Premier League commercial general counsel for 7 years.
When you look at the two leagues, the League of Ireland, it feels this year certainly has made quite a bit of progression in terms of exposure. Attendances are up. Maybe that's to do with the fact that Shamrock Rovers are one of, if not the best supported club, and are having a very good season, so they've seen a big rise in attendances. But still, the League of Ireland is not in a particularly great place at the moment. And then you look at the Danske Bank Premiership in Northern Ireland, average attendance just over 1,000. Okay, Linfield are getting over 2,500. They're ranked 48th out of 55 leagues. I think the Republic of Ireland, the League of Ireland, is now 42nd. What makes you think that actually joining these two struggling leagues together will somehow make a successful league?
I don't think joining the leagues together would solve the problem by itself, but I do think it's a very important dimension that could win back the broader public opinion. I would say that both associations, broadly speaking, have three remits: the national side, the grassroots game, and their national leagues. And I would say that both national leagues have been neglected. I think that's fair to say. The NIFL, which runs the league in the north, was created, and I think that has brought about benefits in terms of structure and just general cleanliness. You know, it's nice and orderly, but the money hasn't flowed like was promised. And I think both associations are incentivized to pay the national coach a lot of money because the prize of getting into European competition is so big. So the incentives are just structured in such a way where the associations understandably want to channel money towards the national side because that's the cash cow. But I think I would like to see the associations take a longer term view and overinvest in the league. And I think if they were to bring government along with them in that aspect, and if you look across Europe, you'll see leagues and clubs that enjoy very low rates in municipal stadia, just very favourable conditions. They can command the back pages. They can, you know, they have a lot of political power. They're much stronger politically, I would say, than the leagues here. But I think the two associations should focus more on the leagues. And back to your question about the All-Ireland League, I think it can shine a light on the league. And because of, say, Dundalk's run in 2016, they showed the potential of what European success can do. So I think the All-Ireland League is the best catalyst for going further in Europe more regularly.
So within your proposal, what's the plan for the structure of the league? You talk about the two organisations there, and are you looking for the FAI and their Northern Ireland counterparts to hand over the League of Ireland completely and just stay out of the running of it, and the clubs and your organisation will run it and try and turn a profit and try and make it a successful organisation? Or is there a role for the governing bodies within that?
There's always a role for the governing bodies. This can't really succeed without them. In Northern Ireland, the league has already been spun out into NIFL, the Northern Irish Football League. Down here, the league is within the FAI. But whatever structure comes about, the two associations have to be in control of this league. It has to be duly subordinate to both of them. Now, beyond that, what the exact structure takes, originally we had been proposing a separate league company that the two associations would have a preference share in that would replace the two domestic seasons. But since recently we've engaged a Dutch sports consultancy called Hypercube. They were the company who facilitated the Danish Superliga structure. Just to let you know, the Danish Superliga has a TV deal in excess of 50 million euros a year. So these guys also do work for leagues around Europe and UEFA, and their advice to us was not to marry yourself to one structure just yet, to broaden the discussion, to see would a split season be possible where you would play home and away in the first half of the year and then move to an All-Ireland League, and also to consider a Setanta Cup type fourth competition. So broadly speaking, those would be the three flavours that an All-Ireland League could take. Full disclosure, I believe a full All-Ireland League in terms of replacing the two leagues would be the most exciting for sponsors, but you have to live in the world of the possible.
So has your viewpoint changed in the last few weeks? Because I mentioned there was a setback, and it was a big setback, which is that the IFA have said that they're not going to sanction this league. They've said it's highly speculative, there's a lack of specificity or guarantees around this league. Is this a reaction, actually maybe these two leagues stay within themselves for a good chunk of the season and then come together for the latter stages?
So it was just unfortunate timing. The IFA's board meeting was the same night as our meeting in Dundalk, at which Hypercube presented, and this was told to the clubs. Yes. So, yes, since the IFA's statement, we have broadened the discussion. So we hope to be at some stage be able to get the IFA back on board, and given the fact that we've broadened the discussion, hopefully that gives them room to.
So how many conversations have you had with the IFA?
Well, over the last year. Three in person.
And were you surprised by that statement? Like, did it come out of the blue, or were you expecting?
No, it came out of the blue. Yeah, it came out of the blue.
And have you been given any sense from the IFA themselves or people around the IFA why it was that night when the clubs were being presented?
I don't know. I don't know. I can only guess.
You've dealt with the FAI as well, and I think this has probably been going on for a couple of years. These proposals sort of behind the scenes, and Noel Mooney sort of mentioned it in passing, mentioned your name, and suddenly everybody became interested. Has there been a difference in attitude, have you found, between the FAI and the IFA in terms of how an All-Ireland League can run?
Definitely. Noel Mooney has said that he's open to the idea, and he invited me in July to speak to all 20 League of Ireland clubs. So definitely I think the FAI is they're in flux at the moment. So
yeah, because I did wonder on that, and as you say, Noel Mooney has been broadly supportive of this. Noel Mooney's going to finish up in the next couple of weeks in his role and will return to UEFA, and we're still waiting for confirmation as to who the interim CEO will be, and then very soon we'll have a new full-time CEO of the FAI. Did you feel when you were dealing with Noel Mooney, you were dealing with somebody who could have an impact, who his word was something that would last in the FAI, or is it a difficult organisation to deal with right now because who knows who's in charge?
I thought he had authority. I thought he had remit to give his views, and yeah, no, I did feel I was engaging with someone who was in charge of an association, and his UEFA background probably helped as well, because ultimately UEFA will need to give this their blessing. So he has been open and fair in his dealings with us, I would say.
When you've been talking to the clubs, and it seems to have been quite a few meetings with the clubs, what have their attitudes been, and I guess what have their concerns been? Because when it comes to Irish football, and understandably so with everything that's come to light over the last 6 months, I think everybody's wary of anybody coming in and wondering what their motivations are. What have the clubs' questions been?
As I mentioned, this started in the north, and it was the northern clubs who were much earlier adopters of this than the southern clubs. So I was living there as well, which probably helped. But as I came down, this would have been, I guess, into late 2017, early 2018, the southern clubs were in the middle of this PCA discussion, the Premier Clubs Alliance, and they were trying to extricate themselves from the FAI with the former CEO in situ. So the general feeling was, when I spoke to them about these proposals, was that's all very nice, very interesting, but we're focusing on this right now. And over the following months, the southern clubs began to warm to it. And so, this hasn't happened quickly. As I said, this started in late 2017, so it's been a very slow process. And I think gradually the southern club, and all the clubs, as shown in Dundalk, which was a brilliant meeting, I think the clubs have warmed to the idea, and those fears that you mentioned, that suspicion, hopefully has dissipated.
And what grabs their attention, obviously, is the financial side of things, the money. So let's talk about that, because I'd imagine that's where a lot of the questions are going to come from. At the moment, within the League of Ireland, and finally it feels we're getting some figures coming to light, because it's been one of the big question marks as to how there was no television rights deal for the League of Ireland. In fact, it's been costing clubs to have their game live on television because of the dip in attendances. Dan MacDonald did some research on this in the last few weeks in the Irish Independent. Said the League of Ireland, it seems, generates about €1.5 million a year. Sponsorship of that from Electricity's around 400,000. And then the television element for the League of Ireland comes to around €250,000 from RTE, with Air Sport a six-figure sum as well. But all in, you're probably looking at less than $500,000 from television rights. You were talking about a seven-figure sum for television rights. Obviously, seven figures can go from anywhere from 1 million to 10 million. Why do you think suddenly you can get a, 750% increase in television revenue, if not more?
Because, well, very frankly, the discussions we've had and their declarations of interest, I would say. But I think it's tricky at the moment for, say, RTE, because on a pure hard calculation, they would say that they lose money broadcasting the league, and it's chicken and egg scenario. So for any of your listeners, we have this social media video campaign on Twitter and on Facebook. If you search for All Ireland League, and we have a website, allirelandleague.com, and in there, one of our videos, we explain about what we call the football wheel, which is this, we think, is this kind of spiral that the league is caught in at the moment. They don't have enough money to invest in facilities and even TV gantries, which means that a broadcaster will have to come along and erect scaffolding for every game. So it's kind of, you're victims of your own poor financial situation. So I think the league needs investment. I think government needs to play a role just to get it up on a more sound footing. And I do think then that broadcasters would see it then as a more viable investment for them. But back to the All-Ireland League, I think, again, it's because of the bounce and interest that they would see on it. It's a new story. I would say...
Have you held negotiations with any TV broadcasters? Because obviously, look, we know well in here what the current media climate is. RTE are on the cusp of severe cutbacks in the coming years. Virgin Media Sport and Virgin Media have been making cutbacks as well in recent times. If you're looking at the broadcasters around, who's suddenly going to make this massive investment in an untested product?
Well, we've spoken to the various pay TV and free-to-air broadcasters who operate in the Irish market, whether they be Indigenous Irish broadcasters or UK-based. And without naming names, as I can say, the pay TV players have declared serious interest in this league. Now, it's not going to be towards Danish money, but it is going to be well in advance of what either league receives at the moment. And like, people might say, why compare yourself to a very mature league like Denmark or Scotland? You're just dreaming, but it's always worthwhile, especially given that they have smaller populations, to compare yourself to someone who does it well. In Denmark, for example, they live under the shadow of the Premier League just like we do. The Scandinavian TV deal for the Premier League dwarfs the individual domestic leagues, but still they manage to have a successful league. And I think, again, back to government, they do help in that respect. And I do think you see the green shoots with Dundalk and some of the progress being made by Bows and Rovers in terms of attendances. There is work being done, but I think the progress being made, even in the north as well, is due to the ingenuity and the resilience of the clubs. The associations aren't the ones putting the money in that's making that happen.
You've mentioned the Danish league, and 50 million is the dream down the track, and they've had clubs who've been successful at Europa League and Champions League level. Copenhagen get to group stage from time to time. Obviously, there's a good history there with the likes of Brøndby. Are the Danish league an example of a league that's been revitalised, or was there always that strength there in terms of how they operated commercially? Or when you've looked around Europe, are there examples of leagues that were really in the doldrums, that were really struggling, that actually got their house in order and are now at a decent level?
Well, that's a good question. I think my research has been, say, in the last 10 years, and I haven't gone beyond that. So I don't know of an example in Western Europe, at least, of a league being as weak as in terms of attendances relative to the population as the leagues here, and having a big bounce. But I guess on a positive note, football is still the biggest sport on the island. That's a controversial statement, but if you look at grassroots participation and interest, say, in English football and British football, I would say that's a fair statement. So it's not some fringe sport we're trying to rejuvenate. This is the world's most popular sport, arguably the island's most popular sport. And in terms of a football spend or football deficit that we run every year, it's in the region of $250 million a year on the island. So again, back to my earlier point, we're obsessed with the game, and it's not trying to invent some new football. The vision I would have for an All-Ireland League would be something akin to college football in the States, where it's not the NFL, it's not the guys at the very, very top of their game, but it's the next stars rising through, with a little bit as well of the likes like Damien Duff, and even in Vincent Kompany and Daley Blind, going back that homeward pull where they come back a bit earlier. So holding on to guys a bit longer and bringing the mature guys back a bit earlier means that you can still have household names and exciting people to watch.
When you've been doing that research then on the last 10 years, what is it that you've discovered puts people off going to games, and maybe more importantly for this, what puts off television companies investing in Irish football?
Well, I can tell a very simple example. So the first game I was at, I think, was in this journey, was about 2 years ago. Pat's at home to Cork City, and I roped a few of my friends in saying, this is going to be great, we're going to... And it was a bad night, it was February, it was wet. I think they heard my accent and put me in with the Cork City fans, even though that wasn't the plan. But we're behind the goals, no roof, raining for most of the game, and the friends I had there with me were like, look, this is not for me, and I lost them there and then. Now I've since gone to all the Dublin clubs' grounds and games, but like if it's not a place you want to spend 2 hours, especially when the weather is bad, you're not going to hold on to them. So,
and are the clubs aware of that? Because every time we talk about growing the League of Ireland, we'll talk about facilities and the experience, and it's great to be able to go out to Tala, and they've got things right at Shamrock Rovers and their partnership with South Dublin County Council, that you can go, you can bring your children, it's clean, it's easy to get to, there's good transport links. That's a real rarity. Are the rest of the clubs aware that actually that is a legitimate reason that people don't go to these games?
Oh, I'm almost certain that they're aware. With Dalymount, obviously, Dublin City Council looks like they're going to, it's probably 2023, that'll be done by. Pats, I'm not sure what's happening there. They had a proposal, but it didn't go through. But absolutely, the clubs have cited stats to me about it, jumps in attendances when you have a better stadium. And I think, like, governments in general, like when they're making investment, central government that is, they'll do some hard-nosed calculation, what's the benefit to the economy. And in terms of pure benefit, the data is mixed. But if you look at, say, Dundalk's run, back to that, when they generated almost 7 million in 2016, and now they're back to 1 to 2 million a year because they're not always in it. The opportunity cost of that, missing out on that 5 million a year, that's just one club, we've 4 places. That's huge. And I think there's a river of European money flowing by, and unless we tap into that, we're going to be this barren wasteland, for lack of a better phrase. And I think if you're appealing to government to invest in the stadia, that's the case you need to make. The governments will use this phrase, fiscal multiplier. For every euro we spend, will we get a euro back, or 2 or 3? I would say it's quite a high return the governments could get because of this European money that the league could generate.
And they don't really have that lobby group at the moment. Something Niall Quinn has spoken about, which I think at one stage certainly was a rival idea. Maybe there's been some coming together, or there's...
Well, I wouldn't say it was a rival. I would say it was simultaneous. I think Niall's focus was on the Republic, whereas I've always had the All-Ireland dimension to the thing. Yes, like, we've met the government multiple times, and that's what we say at cabinet level, and that's what we say every time, that the league needs investment. The government's answer would be, and this is north and south, the guys who come through from a football lobbying point of view don't seem to have their ducks in a row as much as the other sports.
Right.
And that's been relayed to me a couple of times, and I think football is definitely doesn't get the love from government that it probably should.
And is that the FAI they're talking about?
Actually, the one that sprung to mind there was a Northern Irish politician who was talking about just football in general. It could be the local club looking for funding, but I would say if you look at the top 10 stadia in the country, over 30,000, I think only one of them is football. So, you're wading into contentious waters here, and I don't think a League of Ireland club can say, can we have a 20,000 seater stadium, because they're just not filling that. Our group, or probably most people, would be advocating for just building these white elephants, but it's just the standards, bathrooms, basics should be in place first. Yeah,
it feels as though we're entering a real transitionary period as well in terms of European football and European Super Leagues and various different levels of that, and there's going to be a new conference league, it seems. So the European places aspect, while I know there's some controversy about potentially losing a spot, nobody's quite sure as to actually where teams are going to go now. Anyways, it looks like the champions will go still into Champions League qualifiers, but there'll be no direct route into the Europa League. Most teams will now go into this Conference League. Do you see this as a sort of feeder league for a potential European Super League, European Conference League? I know it's talked at the moment, maybe the Dutch and Belgian leagues, that actually European football in 10 years could look a very different place, and that Ireland could actually put itself in a position that the best teams, whether they're playing 20 games in Europe a season, like, is that something you've looked at?
I would say that because you have 55 member nations now, Kosovo being the most recent, you have a lot of mouths to feed for UEFA, and I would say, all else being equal, they wouldn't mind seeing some consolidation of the smaller leagues into bigger ones, like you have in the Pro 14 and rugby. If you want to compete with the big 4 leagues or big 5 leagues, you need to have bigger games, and I think the best way to do that is to join up. And I think this could set a precedent for men's football. The Dutch and Belgian women did have a cross-border league. I think if you look at Dundalk's run in 2016, in the last round they played Legia Warsaw and they lost. And if they'd won that, they would have been in the Champions League. That window has gotten even narrower since because of the UEFA cycles. Now the top 4 leagues have half the Champions League places between them, and that's a very tough environment. So I think realistically for the clubs here, I think getting into the Champions League is even tougher. So. It's going to be. I would say, to answer your question, in terms of the third tier competition, I think for leagues to capitalise on that, they need to be in a good state. And I think I would worry that both leagues at the moment aren't even at the right level to be able to capitalise on that new football pyramid that's coming in.
So what happens next? I presume you're here today and you're doing the rounds this week because you want to say that this isn't dead in the water, which might be a lot of people's feelings when they read that statement from the IFA that they're not going to sanction this, that's it. What happens next?
So Hypercube are engaging in a process of engagement with the clubs, and the clubs are sending their data to Hypercube in terms of attendances and finance. Hypercube are going to crunch the numbers and advise us as a group and the clubs what is the best format of cross-border competition, what is the best both in terms of commercial viability, attendances, and UEFA places retention. And a big factor in that will be the appeal to the associations. And the IFA's view, of course, we've taken on board already. So the IFA's stated worries, loss of independence, loss of funding from UEFA. So we have to preempt all of those concerns. So
should you have engaged those consultants earlier, in hindsight? If this has been going on for a couple of years?
Maybe. It was only when Alex Horn came onto our group, and who ran the FA, Alex had dealt basically with people who had used them before, and that was the advice. So yeah, in an ideal world, hindsight is 2020. But I would say the message is that the project is absolutely still ongoing. The clubs, despite the IFA statement from the north, have decided we absolutely want to remain involved. That includes Linfield, Glentoran, Crusaders, and for anyone who wishes to find out more, I would say allinleague.com, and if they're feeling generous, they can always support the project on the website. But the key message is that I think this will happen eventually, and I think it's just a matter of when.
What's in it for you?
Absolutely nothing. It's a very irrational thing to be doing. I'm asking myself that every day. Why am I doing this? But
so you made, I asked you about your background, like from reading. You made a few quid when you sold your company initially. So financially, it seems you're quite secure. But obviously, everyone, when it comes to Irish football, is very cynical of people's motivations.
Yeah.
And the further this progresses, the closer it gets to an end point, and your role in it, the question will come up again and again. Like, where do you see your role being at the end of this?
So, like, what we've advocated for all along was a league 100% owned by the clubs. So nobody, us or anybody else, will have an equity share in this league. It's only the clubs. So that's the first thing. I, nor anyone in our group, will be sending in invoices for our time in this. And finally, I have said all along that I will have no role in this league. I wouldn't say I would be good at running a league. It's a very different skill set. So it's a labour of love. Like, if you look around the clubs, north and south, it's people on these boards who are being asked for a dig out every few weeks. Why are they involved in it? Like, they are even more rational than I am. At least this hopefully will have an end point. So, I'm in good company.
So you still feel this is very much on track. What are the next key points that should be keeping an eye out for over the next few months?
I would say the video channels will we will hope to, like, I guess the last few weeks we've paused a little bit and tried to digest what the IFA have said, but we hope to ramp that up again. It's been very well received, and we would always welcome people to reach out to us, info@allirelandleague.com. Don't be a stranger. We always welcome input from fans and coaches, whatever else. So I would say after Hypercube's analysis is done, that should be in the new year, we will probably release a statement saying that these are the different formats of competition we think could work. And part of Hypercube's process will be to hold fan forums to get the fans' idea. Because in Denmark, they couldn't agree a format, and the Danish structure that you see now was actually came out of a fan event one night. They put a crate of beer literally on the table for 3 hours and they thrashed it out. So we think the fans have a big role to play in kind of having input in this.
This isn't the week to be talking about how great the Danes are. We hate those guys right now. Kieran, I think it's great, listen, after the last 6 months that we have people with ambition for Irish football and we're having these type of conversations. Keep us up to date over the next while.
Thank you.